In 1969, Sears Roebuck was the largest retailer in the United States. At its peak, roughly 1 in 2 American households had a Sears credit card, and the company was the largest private employer in the country. They were so confident in their dominance that in 1973 they built the tallest building in the world just to have a bigger headquarters. That company no longer exists. Not because Amazon disrupted it, though Amazon gets most of the blame, because in 2005, a hedge fund manager applied a philosophy lifted from Ayn Rand to Sears's corporate structure and turned it into 30 competing fiefdoms that fought each other for resources until there was nothing left. This is not the disruption story you've heard. Richard Sears sold his first product in 1886, a shipment of pocket watches he bought cheap and turned around by mail. He used those profits to start a catalog. By the early 1890s, Sears, Roebuck and Company was mailing millions of catalogs a year, selling everything from clothing to livestock to entire pre-cut houses, delivered flat by railroad and assembled on the buyer's land. In a country without reliable local retail, the Sears catalog solved a logistics problem that had no other solution. The catalog wasn't just a sales channel, it was infrastructure. Millions of rural Americans used it to access goods they couldn't find locally at a price they could compare before buying. That trust, built across a generation of households ordering everything from their wedding rings to their kitchen stoves from the same company, became Sears' real competitive advantage. Not price, not convenience, the certainty that Sears would deliver what it promised and would stand behind it. By the 1960s, Sears had pivoted from catalog to stores, and from stores to dominance. It was the country's largest retailer, employing roughly 350,000 people more than any private company in America. And in 1973, to announce exactly how large they had become, Sears opened the Sears Tower in Chicago, 110 stories, the tallest building on earth, a title it would hold for 25 years. Then Walmart happened. Sam Walton's discount model, lower margins, higher volume, better supply chain, undercut Sears on price, and outmaneuvered it on selection throughout the 1980s and into the 1990s. Sears responded with reorganizations, brand pivots, and strategy shifts that mostly confused customers without solving the underlying problem. By 2002, Kmart, Sears's closest head-to-head rival, had filed for bankruptcy. The era of confident department store dominance was over. Into that bankruptcy stepped a hedge fund manager named Edward Lampert, the founder of ESL Investments, a Greenwich, Connecticut hedge fund. Lampert had a reputation for being methodical, intensely private, and deeply influenced by the novelist philosopher Ayn Rand, whose doctrine of rational self-interest he had internalized as something closer to management science than political philosophy. He bought Kmart's assets out of bankruptcy in 2003, paying roughly 33 cents on the dollar. In 2005, Lampert merged Kmart and Sears into Sears Holdings Corporation, a combined company with more than 3,500 stores and approximately $55 billion in annual revenue. On paper, it was one of the largest retailers in the world rebuilt at scale. In practice, it was the beginning of an experiment no retail company had ever attempted. Lampert believed that rational self-interest, properly structured, produces better outcomes than coordination from above. He had studied Rand's work seriously. He had built ESL Investments around the principle that the best analysts don't collaborate, they compete, because competition sharpens judgment. He believed the same principle could be applied to a retail company. Give each division its own profit and loss statement. Let them compete for resources. The strong units survive. The weak ones lose funding to better performers. The whole company becomes leaner, faster, and harder to kill. He reorganized Sears Holdings into approximately 30 separate internal business units: appliances, apparel, tools, real estate, and more. Each unit had its own leadership team, its own profit and loss statement, and its own budget. Each competed internally for resources, store floor space, marketing dollars, corporate capital investment. The units that performed would be rewarded. The ones that didn't would lose resources to better performers. The theory was that this internal market would force every unit to maximum efficiency, and the optimized sum of 30 lean parts would outperform any external competitor. Former Sears executives who spoke to Bloomberg, Fortune, and the Wall Street Journal described what actually happened inside. Units hoarded data instead of sharing it because sharing helped rivals. The appliance unit refused to cede floor space to apparel, not because of merchandising logic, but because each unit's bonus depended on its own metrics, and every square foot given up hurt someone's P&L. Marketing units declined to run promotions for products owned by competing units. Customer loyalty programs couldn't be coordinated across categories. One former executive called the experience "Lord of the Flies." Several others used the same phrase independently. The 30 units weren't competing with Amazon, they were competing with each other. And they were very good at it. While the internal war ran, Amazon was quietly becoming what Sears had once been. The store Americans trusted for everything. Amazon's retail revenue grew from roughly $3 billion in 2005 to more than $90 billion by 2016. It was the same trust and selection proposition Sears had pioneered a century earlier, and Sears, too busy internally, had no coordinated answer to offer. As same-store sales declined, Lampert's response was to harvest the assets underneath the business. In 2014, Land's End, a profitable catalog brand Sears had acquired years earlier, was spun off as a separate public company, stripping its revenue from the holding entity. Real estate was sold, auto centers were shuttered, distribution centers were transferred to related entities. The company was not being turned around, it was being wound down in pieces. Store count fell from 3,500 in 2006 to fewer than 500 by 2017. Revenue dropped from $55 billion to under $17 billion in the same period. The underlying business wasn't recovering. The asset base was being liquidated. On October 15, 2018, Sears Holdings filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy, listing approximately $11.8 billion in debt. In February 2019, Lampert's own hedge fund bought the surviving assets out of bankruptcy for approximately $5.2 billion. The person who had presided over the collapse purchased it back from the creditors. Today, fewer than 20 Sears and Kmart stores remain open. The popular version of this story is that Sears lost to Amazon, that e-commerce built a better Sears catalog, and Sears was too slow to adapt. That's not wrong, but it's incomplete. By the time Amazon was a genuine threat to all of general retail, Sears was already incapable of a coordinated response, not because it lacked resources, but because its own structure had made coordination impossible. 30 separate units, each rationally optimizing for its own survival, produced an outcome that was irrational for the company as a whole. Eddie Lampert ran a coherent experiment. Rational self-interest, applied to corporate structure, produces exactly what game theory would predict. Actors defect from the cooperative solution when the incentives reward defection. The units behaved rationally. The company didn't survive it. A retailer that once delivered a pre-built house by railroad didn't fail because the world changed around it. It failed because the people inside it were too busy fighting each other to compete with anyone outside. Every episode of this channel goes looking for that same decision. Not the disruption everyone blames, but the choice inside the building that made it fatal. Subscribe to see which company we look at next.